Just to recap now of the headlines that we got regarding the tariff announcement. Of course, we were waiting for the president to speak at 3:30 Eastern time this afternoon. The metal tariffs are said to take effect in 15 days, this according to the Associated Press. Mexico and Canada said to be exempted indefinitely from the tariffs. I have to say we were expecting that, we believe, as long as the NAFTA negotiations continue, and the hope then that the NAFTA negotiations conclude positively. Let's get some more context here, though. Bloomberg's Michael McKee joins us now. Mike, your views?
Well, this is, as you said, expected. The president has been talking about it. He's been lobbied very heavily by not just business people, but by the Steelworkers Union, because the Steelworkers Union also represents the steelworkers in Canada.
Yes, we know that well. Yes.
And by Canadian and Mexican officials. Canada is our biggest steel importer. We import 16% roughly of our steel from Canada. 70% of the steel that we use is produced in the United States. So of that 30%, 16% comes from Canada. Mexico, about 9%. So they're two of the top four importers, and it is a significant concession to them to leave them out of these tariffs, if that is indeed what the White House is doing.
Guys, let's just pull up the dollar Mexico and the dollar Canada just to give you a sense of where they're moving. I think we're some 0.5% stronger in the Mexican peso relative to the US dollar, a bit of a bounce in dollar CAD, but I think you have to look at the performance of both of these currencies over the last month to get a sense of what the minor gyrations off the back of that say. And it goes directly to what you were saying, Mike, there about expected.
And it shows that the president is proving that he can be flexible with these tariffs if he does indeed impose them come 3:30 p.m. Another country that we have questions about is Australia, because President Trump noted that the U.S. has a trade surplus with Australia, his favorite metric here when he's talking about trade imbalances, and he called Australia a long-term partner. So do we expect some kind of exemption carved out for them at some point?
We haven't heard about Australia. They have also lobbied hard. The argument that the president is making is that this is a national security issue. And the argument the Australians, the Germans, the Canadians, and the Mexicans have all made is like, hey, we're on your side. We're your allies. So what's the national security issue here? And the Australians are particularly worried about that. They're somewhat isolated and more affected by steel overcapacity in Asia. So they would like to be left out, but there's no word on whether they will be.
Let's talk about the Chinese, too, because they had been relatively quiet up until overnight. And then we got pretty stern comments saying, again, there would be a response from the Chinese and that ultimately this is unacceptable. If you start exempting the Canadians, the Mexicans, the Australians potentially, the UK was another one, of course, that the Steelworkers Union president mentioned to us, too, that should be exempt. You're kind of making it pretty clear who you're tackling.
Whoa. It's very clear who they're trying to take on, but they're not going to take on China at all. The problem is that 94% of our steel imports of China's steel production, let me get that straight, 94% of their steel production is already covered by U.S. tariffs, punitive tariffs. 96% of their aluminum production is. So this isn't really going to hit them at all. What the White House would like to do is have the world turn on China and say, cut your overproduction.
Yes.
But if they're going to put tariffs on the rest of the world, that's going to be difficult to get them to do, to get them to go along.